We are on time.
Whenever you wish.
Okay. First, I want to welcome everybody who is
recording in progress.
To this keynote speaker session at ISLA 2021. It is a great honor for us, for the LACAIS community and the ISLA conference to receive our distinguished guest speaker for today, Stacie Peter. Stacie is a Ben Williams Professor of Information System and Business Analytics at Baylor University and Hammer School of Business. Her primary research focus examines how information systems and technology have the potential to generate not only value, but also harm to individuals and organizations. She has published her research in outlets that include the MIS Quarterly, Journal of Management Information Systems, European Journal of Information Systems, and the Journal of Association of Information Systems. She also has received funding from the National Science Foundation. She serves today as an editor-in-chief of the Database for Advances in Information Systems. She's also an associate professor, associate editor for MIS Quarterly and Information System Journal, and is currently a senior editor for IS Transactions and on Replication Research and AIS Transaction on Human-Computer Interactions. She has received also on AI
is a global organization of faculty, deans, students, industry professionals, and accrediting bodies with a shared interest in promoting research within business disciplines that address problems that not only impacts business, but also society. Another organization, the Responsible Research and Innovation Networked globally, found online at rring.eu, explains that responsible research and innovation involves societal actors, researchers, citizens, policymakers, business, third sector organizations, who work together during the whole research and innovation process to better align both the process and its outcomes with the values, needs, and expectations of society. This group was developed with funding from the European Union, and it has faculty, students, industry, public policy decision makers, among others, who work around the world. As you hear these definitions, you may still wonder, okay, you've given me some definitions, but what? Here are two quick examples, and I'll share more as we continue. A researcher with expertise in supply chains might develop a novel. This research has the potential to contribute to knowledge within the context of supply chain research, but it also solves an important problem within society, vaccine availability and equity. As another example, maybe there's a business who's made a commitment to engage in more sustainable business practices. They want to find a way to reduce costs within its data centers. The business partners with an information systems scholar who has an interest in knowledge within Green IS. They find a way to reduce costs by identifying a sustainable, environmentally friendly approach to cool the data center. So the scholar can create new knowledge that can be published, but that knowledge also addresses a business need, such as reducing costs, as well as a societal need, creating a sustainable, business-friendly approach to cooling data centers. So now that we have some understanding and examples of what is responsible research, why should we take the time to engage in responsible research? Within our own field, Walsham encouraged IS scholars to move beyond studying traditional topics of information systems, such as effective or efficient use of information technology. He encouraged scholars to embrace ethical goals and critical approaches. He posed the question, are we making the world better with ICTs? He published this article in the Journal of Information Technology in 2012. Some scholars have responded to this call. Information Systems Journal has a forthcoming special issue on responsible research within information systems. So we're seeing increased attention on this issue within the field. The value of responsible research is we're able to also share our results and our knowledge beyond academia. When the United Nations created its list of sustainable development goals, it started to create a standard nomenclature of how we could discuss or position our research within a framework of societal needs. We now have a shared language that we can use to explain or position a research effort that has been embraced worldwide. So, using the shared language, we have a means to develop and disseminate our knowledge, and we can communicate this knowledge beyond our academic audiences. We can think more broadly about the goal of informing policy, promoting positive business practices, and addressing societal needs. Increasingly, we're seeing accrediting bodies such as the AACSB that call for documenting and engaging in societal impacts as part of their teaching and scholarship standards. Some of these changes have actually been informed and developed through collaborations with organizations such as the Responsible Research and Business and Management Network. At this point, you may be asking, so what makes a research project a responsible research project? How do I transition from regular, traditional academic research to responsible research? Well, the RRBM network has identified 7 principles of responsible research. You may not necessarily have all of these components within a research project or program, but those engaging in responsible research will likely have most of them. I'll talk about each of these principles in the context of our discipline, information systems. Principle 1 is service to society. This is research that seeks to develop knowledge that benefits not only business, but also society at a local or global level, for the intention of creating a better world. For us in information systems, this gets to Washam's question that he asked nearly a decade ago when he asked if we're making a better world with information technology. Principle 2 is valuing both basic and applied contributions. We must recognize the importance and value of not only basic research, which is what we tend to publish in our top journals, such as the AS Senior Scholar Basket of 8 journals, but we also need to recognize that there's importance to the applied contributions that can inform and contribute to practice in society. Often, these contributions are published in different types of outlets that are more accessible to practitioners, but we need to recognize that both basic research and applied research is necessary to address business and societal needs. Principle 3 is valuing plurality and multidisciplinary collaboration. This is an easy principle to talk about, but it's extremely difficult to perform. But as we tackle increasingly complex problems, we need to identify increasingly complex solutions. We often are not going to achieve this goal with a single perspective. It might be that we need to reach within the business school and across other schools, colleges, and research traditions to find new and innovative ways to address challenging, complex issues that need new solutions. The 4th principle is sound methodology. Many years ago, within the field of information systems, we had a rigor versus relevance debate. And in this discussion, we questioned which is more important, rigorous sound research practices or the study of relevant problems for practice. So responsible research would take the position that we need both rigor and relevance. We should use good science using whatever approach we may use, whether it be qualitative, quantitative, or design science, and we apply these sound methodological principles in the context of responsible, socially impactful research. The 5th principle is stakeholder involvement. Although many of us work in business schools, it can still be difficult to get stakeholders involved in our research. I've experienced challenges when engaging in fieldwork, which includes the difficulty of being able to partner with organizations. But it's going to be difficult to make a meaningful impact to business and society if we can't get stakeholders involved in the research process. As researchers, we have an opportunity to help stakeholders from organizations learn how we can partner with them as scholars and as researchers to provide value and benefit to them. But this requires us to listen to their needs, problems, and ideas. So through this stakeholder involvement, we have an opportunity to co-create research with organizational stakeholders. Principle 6 is impact on stakeholders. Often our top journals encourage us to focus on the theoretical implications of our research, but we also need to consider the importance of the impact of our work. This means we need to evaluate research and research contributions differently as we consider how we evaluate faculty. Some accreditation bodies, such as AACSB, are encouraging this focus on impact within business schools. But it still requires deans, department chairs, senior faculty, and even early and mid career faculty to start reframing how we think about research and how we evaluate research, not just on the journal that it's published in, but also the impact of the research that we're conducting. We need to think about other measures of success and impact beyond the publication outlet alone. Principle 7 is broad dissemination. Right now, many of us probably operate in a publish or perish environment. There is so much opportunity for us within academia to catch up to other ways to disseminate what we do and what we learn beyond our traditional journal publication outlets. There are other mediums to consider: practitioner-oriented publications, blogs, podcasts, and other creative ways to share our insights. Of course, a challenge is that not all of these dissemination outlets are rewarded within our discipline and universities. There are some scholars who are actively paving the way to try to make these contributions more widely recognized and known, which could hopefully help others along the way in their own responsible research journey. So, as I think about my own journey to find responsible research, or maybe it found me, I have to say it was quite winding, and I certainly have had some challenges along the way. I've also learned a lot along the way. The second part of this presentation is an opportunity for me to share a little bit about my path with responsible research in case it's useful to you as you consider your future research programs and projects. So, let me start by sharing a little bit about myself. Early in my doctoral studies and my career, I had an interest in understanding more about how we evaluate information systems and technology, how information technology is used or not used by individuals, groups, and organizations, as well as the impacts of information systems, both positive and negative impacts that individuals, groups, and organizations may experience. Now, that was my professional interest and what I was doing as a scholar and researcher. But in my free time, I would find myself reading books, watching documentaries, and supporting causes that were related to issues like human trafficking. Or I would find myself drawn towards causes related to individuals who are from marginalized groups. These individuals may be marginalized due to racism, gender bias, disability status, or many other reasons that people might become disenfranchised within our society. As I looked around and noticed different colleagues and how they were building their careers, I found a few that had these really great opportunities where they could integrate their personal interests, these passions that they had, and personal causes with their professional interests and goals. I just couldn't figure out how to do that for myself. For me, these types of projects always seem to be two separate worlds. I didn't understand how I might be able to take this professional interest that I have and combine it with my personal interest. So, I realized that my deep professional expertise related to evaluation, use, and impacts of technology could be combined with some of these interests that I have related to human trafficking or marginalized groups. And I started to realize that maybe there was a possibility that I could integrate both my research and my personal interests and causes. So, let me offer one example of how I try to combine these two worlds of my professional interests and my personal interests. And at the intersection, I found opportunities to conduct responsible research. For many years, I had a personal interest in the problem of human trafficking. If you're not familiar with this term, human trafficking is when an individual is compelled through force, fraud, or coercion to engage in labor, sexual services, or forced organ removal. It's a huge problem worldwide, and I'd become aware of this problem through some outreach work I did when I was working as a professor at a different university. It was something that I would sometimes follow in the news, I would read articles and books on the subject, but generally it felt something far away, and I really wasn't sure how I might be able to do anything about it to affect change, particularly within my professional interests in life. Not long after I moved to Waco, Texas to begin my job at Baylor University, I read a story in the local paper about an organization that was educating middle and high school students about the dangers of human trafficking, particularly sex trafficking. So the newspaper article shared how a student in a local school was a survivor of sex trafficking. The student got caught up in the world of sex trafficking, and I realized that sex trafficking happens everywhere, and there is the possibility to make it legal. I reached out to the nonprofit in the article, which is Unbound, and I offered to be a volunteer. I shared that I had research knowledge, and so they asked me to help them with researching information that they could provide in their training presentations. And I also was able to help with entering some data for a study they were conducting. So this was kind of this nice opportunity to use my professional knowledge and expertise in an area to support a personal research interest that would not only help me feel like I'm making a difference, but I could use my professional knowledge to make a difference to this local organization. A couple of months later, I had a conversation with a doctoral student, and in a strange turn of events, we found out that we both had this shared interest in addressing the problem of human trafficking. We weren't quite sure how to actually do research on this topic, but we developed a research idea and wrote up an abstract for a workshop. But really, nothing ever came of this project because she was working on her dissertation, which was in a different area. Here I was transitioning to a new role at a university and working on a range of research projects, so nothing much happened during her time as a doctoral student. Several years later, the student graduated, and she was working at another university. She reached out to me and said, maybe there's a way that we can try to make some progress on this research idea and abstract that we talked about years ago. Maybe there was a way to combine our interest in information systems research and human trafficking. She heard a podcast about an organization called Deliver Fund. This is a nonprofit who is partnering with law enforcement, and they use data-driven and technology-oriented approaches to fight human trafficking. So we decided, let's reach out to them. They're interested in technology. We're interested in technology. Maybe there's some kind of research collaboration we could partner with together. And in our first conversation with them, we learned that they had a technology that they were training law enforcement personnel on how to use in the fight against human trafficking. They just felt that they had lower adoption rates than they really wanted. So during this phone call, a huge light bulb goes off for me in this conversation. Because of my professional interest in the use of technology and my deep experience in this area, I realized we have a problem that we could actually help them with. We understand as information systems researchers why people use or don't use information technology, and we could give them some practical insights based on the literature, but maybe there were some nuances about this particular context and domain in terms of why people were using or not using the technology in this area. There are so many positive aspects to conducting responsible research that I've experienced. First, it's been such a pleasure and joy to combine a personal passion and interest with my research. This issue of how do we fight human trafficking is one that I care deeply about. So, finding a way to combine my research with a cause that I care so much about makes the activity of scholarly research just much more rewarding than I ever thought it could be. A second benefit is that I've always had a sense of relevance in mind whenever I am trying to work on a research project. I often think about how does this research have the potential to make a difference towards others? Yet I recognize that many of my projects are really only hitting an academic audience. That's important, and I'm not negating the importance of contributing value towards other academics, but I really wanted to do things that could make an impact towards others and towards practice, and now towards society. A third benefit is that this research area has opened up new collaborations and new opportunities to meet with scholars and professionals that I never would have met otherwise. My colleague and I received a National Science Foundation planning grant, and we were given the opportunity to create a multidisciplinary research team that consists of academics and professionals with an interest in the fight against human trafficking. I've been able to meet people from criminal justice, from economics, from political science, and so many other areas that are great people doing really fascinating work. And it's truly opened my eyes to new ideas and new problems to address, not only within human trafficking research, but also in the context of information systems. A fourth benefit is that my engagement with practice is completely changed compared to how I've engaged with practice previously. In this particular project, it's a different conversation with your stakeholders in terms of how you might approach a research project or collaboration with them. In this particular project, we're truly partners against a common enemy. We're working together to fight human trafficking. So it opens up a different approach to talk about how we might share data, insights, knowledge, and expertise because we're united in a common cause. Our professional partners have been exactly that, partners. We are truly collaborating and co creating knowledge together to generate new ideas and knowledge to address a really important social problem. So, although I've had many benefits associated with conducting responsible research, I've also encountered a few challenges along the way. The first challenge is that sometimes I experience negativity from others. When I share with others my passion to study how information technology can be used in the fight against human trafficking, I often receive a mix of reactions. The most common is I get, "Wow, that's really interesting, important work." But it's usually followed up with, "But no IS journal will ever publish it." I recognize that the many people who've expressed this concern to me, they're well meaning, good intentioned people are scholars. They're often trying to warn or keep me from going down a path that might not lead to success. I recognize that I'm fortunate to be at a point in my career where, let's say, these naysayers are correct and no one is willing to publish this research in an information systems journal. I have some flexibility that I could publish research elsewhere in this area. Not everyone has this flexibility because of maybe the timing of their career or considering their institutional structures and requirements. What I've found as I've started to pursue this type of research is that there are many editors in chief and senior editors at top journals within the information systems discipline that care deeply about creating impactful research and making a difference, making the world a better place with information systems research. So, some of these editors in chief and senior editors may not know the term responsible research, but they do see the value of impact. So, I think some of these comments where people are maybe, again, just trying to help, saying, "Are you sure you want to progress in your career that way? This might be risky." They may not realize that there's a growing community of people who care about responsible research, even if they don't have this name for it. They might be thinking about high impact research or impactful research, but may not necessarily call it responsible research. You have to think about your research differently. Because responsible research assumes a high impact to stakeholders, you have to think about the entire research project differently than how you might think about other types of research projects. It often will require a new and different type of engagement with stakeholders. And while that can be a great benefit and be incredibly rewarding, it is quite different than how you might approach research in the past. Often, to get that nature of partnership and collaboration that we might need in order to get to a successful, responsible research outcome, it might require adjusting your interests and research goals to try to find a better overlap with the stakeholders' needs. And this will be a way to gain their involvement and commitment to the project. So, your research interests may not take center stage initially. It may be about gaining the trust and buy in of the stakeholders and focusing on that research a bit differently until you can create that partnership and co creation process with your stakeholders. A third consideration is that many of us haven't really been taught how to translate a societal problem into a research question that's of interest related to our discipline. As I previously mentioned, if we only focus on the societal problem and we don't think about how we can contribute knowledge to the information systems discipline, we are going to have a very difficult time publishing that research and communicating our results. So we have to use different skills and knowledge to think about how to convert the societal problem or business need into a research question that's interesting and relevant for IS scholars. So, in our particular case, when I learned that a nonprofit is trying to find ways to encourage more law enforcement to use technology to fight human trafficking, this is a research problem we know and understand within information systems: adoption, acceptance, use, success of information systems. Because I could find a connection between the nonprofit's needs and a critical issue that we tend to study within the field of information systems, I was able to create this connection to the nonprofit's challenges as well as IS research. To be frank, my intention is not that all of my research in the area about how do we use information technology to fight human trafficking is to be a story about the adoption and use of information systems, but was a great starting point, and it offered me a pathway into the organization as well as into publishing IS research as I started this project. It was a way to help me turn this high risk endeavor of trying to focus on a social issue into a lower risk project. Finally, as I mentioned before, Principle 7 of responsible research is broad dissemination. So, this requires thinking about how you might communicate the results of your research differently. You need to think about how each audience perceives research and what they expect in terms of research outcomes. So, for my academic audience, I have to be able to come up with a theory that might be appropriate for the research project or context. And sometimes that can be incredibly difficult because we're not necessarily always approaching these types of projects with a specific theory in mind. Other stakeholders who aren't academics aren't so interested with theory. They really just want to know what's the outcome of the responsible research effort. So it's important to be able to convert those findings from a research effort into something that's practical and actionable that stakeholders can use within the project. Some of these efforts to communicate with stakeholders may not be valued in many institutions. So it might be creating blog posts or training materials or podcasts or other ways to push out knowledge to those who are less familiar with research and really just care about the findings themselves. While many universities may not value this type of knowledge creation effort, we know that making an effort to disseminate our results to stakeholders in a way that resonates with them will not only be valued by those stakeholders to hopefully allow us to continue research in this area, but we also recognize that funding agencies or other types of stakeholders might value the way in which we're trying to disseminate our results to the audience. But this issue of how we communicate results to different types of audiences is one that's incredibly time consuming, and it's not an issue that we experience on most traditional research projects. Often we're only trying to communicate those results to academics, and we don't worry so much about how other stakeholders might consume or use the results of our research. So this requires an extra role on the part of the researcher to think about how can the results be disseminated broadly to many different types of audiences with competing goals, needs, and issues. So as I've been sharing these ideas, you might be thinking, well, based on what she's describing, I'm already doing responsible research. I just didn't have a name for it. Some of you may be thinking, well, that's great that she wants to do this, but it's not really a fit for me based on my research interests, my institution, or other reasons. Maybe a few of you are thinking, this sounds interesting. Maybe there is a way for me to explore opportunities in responsible research. Regardless of where you might be on this continuum, let me share a few lessons learned that I have from my experiences in case at some point now or in the future you choose to engage in responsible research and take up this challenge. First, make sure you believe in what you are doing. Know why you've committed yourself to a particular responsible research project or program. If you don't have this strong interest or passion in the social or business issue that you're trying to address, it can be really easy to believe those folks who express negativity about your efforts. If you find that you're doubting yourself, find a colleague who believes in you or the work. Maybe you need a collaborator who can help you along the way. Maybe you need a support system of other academics who feel similarly about the value of responsible research. There is a growing support within business schools and the information systems field for responsible research. I mentioned two organizations earlier, the RRBM Network and RRING. So get involved with these groups or meet other scholars who are engaged in responsible research through these networks. Even within the information systems community, the Association for Information Systems offered its first annual AIS Impact Award in 2020, and it recognized three projects that offered an impact to business, society, or knowledge beyond an academic contribution. There's many of us that believe in this type of research. So if you find yourself doing this type of work and you're starting to get discouraged or you're hearing a lot of negativity, come find us who are out there ready and willing to support you. Next, I would encourage you to choose your collaborators carefully. You need colleagues who share in your vision. Sometimes people will gravitate to a responsible research topic because they feel it's trendy. For example, a scholar who suggests that they want to study green information systems and sustainability because it's trendy, or they think that any research in this area is guaranteed to be published, they're probably not going to share the same passions, values, and commitment to the effort that you will if you have a direct passion and interest in this area. It's also important that you find collaborators who are not so focused on the societal issue or problem that they cannot approach this from a research perspective. It's important to find collaborators who can understand not only the social issue and its value, but also recognizes the importance of good methodology and sound research that can be used to address the societal issue. For those of you who are just starting in this area of responsible research, one of my pieces of advice would be look for easy wins and build momentum from there. So, as I mentioned previously, we started off our collaboration with this nonprofit by focusing on this issue of technology adoption. Because we were able to start this project by framing the research question in the context of technology adoption, it gave us two wins. It gave us a quick connection to the organization, and so that we could offer insights very quickly based on existing IS research that could make this collaboration useful for them. But second, it also created a win for us as researchers because we already had a tradition of IS research and knowledge within this area that we could continue to contribute to knowledge in the space of technology adoption, but in a new context. Finding opportunities to connect the societal problem to your research expertise and your existing knowledge can help you build that necessary momentum to help you expand opportunities in the future. Last but not least, I'd encourage you to think about opportunities for multidisciplinary research. This is probably not where you're going to start your efforts, but if you do have a passion, you're addressing a complex problem, bringing in people who can approach the issue differently from you can open up new opportunities. Within our context of using technology to fight human trafficking, we have identified so many fascinating research questions we'd love to study that intersect with law, criminology, political science, economics, and many others. And so now we're starting to find collaborators in these fields and expanding our research opportunities to engage in more multidisciplinary efforts to really address the problem. This was a very quick and short introduction into the idea of responsible research and some of my experiences associated with conducting responsible research within information systems. And I appreciate your time and your willingness to listen to this presentation. If you have questions about anything I've shared today or would like to talk further, please don't hesitate to contact me. I've shared my email address here. I always look forward to further conversation on this topic or any others. So thanks for the opportunity to share my interest and my passion and work with you today. And I look forward to any questions or thoughts you might have on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stacie. We have enjoyed so much your talk. I think we have a lot of challenges, at least in Latin America, regarding responsible research. I was listening to your talk, and I was thinking about all the researchers that are joined today in this keynote speaking, and I was thinking about how many of them probably are not right now conducting responsible research or wanted to do it. So I really appreciate your talk, and I will open the floor for questions. Is if anybody want to ask something to Stacy? Okay, Alexander, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Aurora. And well, thank you very much, Stacy. For 20 something years, I've been teaching my students that they had to have in their methodological procedures chapter of their dissertation, they should concern themselves with ethical issues. Now I think I'll have to change that. And I believe it would, I wish I could go back 20 years and start asking them to write a topic on how their research is responsible in the way, how does it respond to needs of our society, of human nature, and not only journal editors or their schools. So thank you very much, Stacy.
Well, I love that you were asking students for 20 years to think about the ethical implications of their research. I mean, that's part of also responsible research as well. So, I mean, whether or not, I mean, for me, it was kind of learning, you know, like Aurora said, I think a lot of you in this community are already doing work in this area. Maybe you didn't have a name for it. And for me, when I found, first of all, that I could do it, that I had that way to meld my interest, but that there was a name, it helped legitimize it for me. And I didn't feel so outside of the mainstream anymore. Even though it's still a little bit outside the mainstream in IS, it's not necessarily the mainstream elsewhere. So Alex, kudos on even on handling the ethics part, because that's so important. And hopefully there's just more that you can share with your students and encouragement you can give them along the way.
Thank you, Stacy. I don't know if anybody has another question for Stacy.
I'd like to thank you again also, Stacy. Wonderful presentation. I think for this community in particular, being that, you know, the Latin American, we have a lot of representatives from schools there. I think that the impact aspect of the research and why it matters is even more critical, right? Because sometimes that may alienate some of our those countries, because, you know, you have so many pressing issues, and if you go full theory and concepts and stuff that don't have any practical implications to immediate societal problems, it may seem, you know, why would we do this and not concerned with this more pressing issue? So I think our current times really call for this area, because more than ever, you know, we have a lot of pressing issues in the world that need our attention and our effort and our energy. So thank you for bringing this light into the community. I'm sure we'll see it growing in the years to come.
Yes. So it's a difference locally or in our region or globally. But sometimes it feels very lonely. And I think, you know, I guess trying to shine a light that there are folks who do appreciate this. Because I think even if I realized, if I'm hearing kind of at my stage of my career, people going, I don't think you can publish this, I can only imagine what colleagues from other types of institutions or those who are less senior in their career are probably experiencing. If I don't think people are trying to actively discourage. I want you to try to navigate this type of work as you pursue efforts to try to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Stacy. I think we have learning a lot about the responsible research. We think sometimes we are doing, but it's good to know that this is a whole, you know, area of development and methodological issues related with responsible research. I don't know if there is any other question from the floor, from the group here. I don't see everybody.
This about my first was a comment about a question. I wanted to ask Stacy, how do you compare or relate to the action research approach? I remember, you know, that area. Oh, what is the interplay that you see between these two area approaches? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think action research can be extremely valuable, you know, if you're working on these responsible research types of topics and projects. It's a great complement because action research has that consulting angle or aspect to it. And so you're actually doing an intervention and you're testing it. So it makes a tremendous amount of sense. So at this point, like, I haven't had experience using action research as part of my research yet. It's been more,
theoretical and descriptive kind of what we've been doing. But given that I've had some funding from the National Science Foundation, we're hoping to apply for some additional funding. I actually see us kind of going into this action research cycle where, particularly related to my work with human trafficking, we're going to try to develop some interventions. We're going to test them with law enforcement and then see how well they work and kind of keep going through that cycle. So action research is a great methodology, I think, that complements this style or approach towards research very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacie. Magid Ali has a question also. Magid?
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me for a question. It is rather a comment. Thank you very much for your presentation. I just would like to share my my kind of another case study, which was related to fake news, and especially started when COVID-19 came in. And I like the lesson learned from your presentation, because it is the same kind of lesson I learned as well through my fake news projects. We've been working with Microsoft. We've been working with non-for-profit organization, Check It First, and multidisciplinary with a lab in University of Brasilia. And I am in UK, in University of Essex, if you're interested to know where I am. So it is really interesting that when I started, actually, it wasn't actually about responsible information system, but it was about a passion about, I don't like to share something on social media if it is fake. And that was the starting point. And from that, I find so many people actually sharing the same views, and with different multidisciplinary, from psychology, from computer science, from social science. So thank you very much for your presentation, and I really enjoy it so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that.
Alfred is also having a question, raising the hands. Please, Alfred.
Hi, Aurora. Thank you for the time. Stacie, thank you for the presentation. Quick question about human subject research. So when you're dealing with the information systems, and I was just talking to a colleague of mine last week, there's one program called City Program where you should go register and kind of maybe put your background to show how you're doing this and get some of those, I guess, ethical ways of being able to do this. I mean, how much has that influenced you and some of the things that you've had to do, and where maybe do you have to kind of be careful with some of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So particularly in the space of human trafficking, the work we've done so far has been with law enforcement. And so we've interviewed police officers, I've interviewed prosecutors. I think the main thing I have to be very careful about is they're not giving me anything specific about cases. I don't ask about specific cases, but they're giving me information about how traffickers operate. They're giving me information that if in the wrong hands could be used by nefarious parties. So one thing that we're having to be very careful about is before we even submit something for review, one of our partners from the nonprofit organization, we make sure he reviews everything before we send it out to make sure we're not disclosing information that would not that traffickers are picking up any information systems journal and reading it to get tips, but we certainly don't want to contribute towards the problem. We only want to be a solution for the problem. And so I think that's one thing that we've had to just be extremely careful about. Also, given the sensitivity of the type of research that I'm performing, I have to be really careful when I invite collaborators on to know, can be difficult material to work with. So are you comfortable looking at this type of material or thinking about people who've been victimized in this way? And we're not really working so much with victims, so we don't have those kinds of ethical considerations at this point. We're working with the good guys, right? So that kind of helps the perspective and mentally kind of keeps me in a good headspace. But we just have to think about some new issues that I would never consider when studying something, at most traditional individual levels of research or research at the organizational level. It's just different. So Alfred, you're exactly right. There are some of those additional considerations that you have to take into account depending on the subject matter.
Great. Thank you, Stacie.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you, Stacie. We have so many questions because the topic is so interesting. Monica Garfield has a question. I want to open the microphone for her.
Hey, Stacie, how you doing?
I'm great. How about you?
Good. So we're doing a lot of work in homelessness. So it sounds like we have the same kind of path. We started to do all action research because that's what they needed. But with COVID-19, we're having a real hard time finding bandwidth with our community partners. And I don't know if it's because homelessness, it was a huge impact. We couldn't get in there. We can't sit down with them anymore. And so we're starting to reassess how we're going to do those collaborations. How have you been able to make those collaborations? Is it showing up for different meetings so that you're around and get to know them, cold calling? I don't know. How are you doing it?
Yeah, great question. So where we got started, we cold called the Liver Fund, as I shared, just to say, would you be interested? And this is how open they were to us. They go, we're offering a training in about 3 weeks. You want to come? And we said, and this was in 2019, and we're like, yes. Where is it? What are the dates? Like, yes, we will figure it out. Like, we will be there. And so we were able to sit in on 3 different training sessions that they had. And so our main sources for our current research at this time have been law enforcement officers we met during these trainings. So we at least kind of had that opportunity to sit face to face, meet them for, sitting side by side with them for a week. And then whenever we call them up a few weeks later saying, hey, how's that information technology going that you've been using? They know who we are. We've gone to lunch with them. We have a rapport. COVID changed all that, right? No more training classes. So kind of a similar situation that you're in. It did open some new opportunities. So I started finding myself getting connected to some other like local coalitions that I wouldn't normally have the bandwidth to travel to in person. So I was able to kind of meet with people virtually and kind of started, I think during COVID, I've just done a lot more expanding my network as opposed to actually doing a lot of the work. Which is good and bad because my heart is in the work. And that's, of course, as researchers, what we want to do. We want to get back into the work. But I also am getting so many new opportunities and new ideas for research problems and questions and ideas because I've spent this time investing in the network over the past year. I think now my new struggle is trying to figure out, initially there was kind of one path to go. It was winding, but it still was just one path. I feel now I'm looking at where there's maybe like 10 roads in front of me and I'm trying to figure out which road do I go down because I have been expanding this network and I can't do it all. Maybe I can pick 2 or 3. And so I think some of those choices are going to be based on how COVID evolves, like how much intensity it takes of face-to-face interaction, how much can be done virtually, how the dependencies that I have in those. So I've had to navigate that too. And I think what I've been doing now is just kind of hedging my bets by looking at some other opportunities to see how might I still be able to make a difference, but maybe it wasn't the original path I intended.
Yeah. The other thing we've been doing is holding a lot of focus groups so that all these different cold people start connecting with one another. It works to some degree, but it's not great. But yeah, same thing. But really cool work. Love to hear you talk about it.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm glad you're doing work too in this area of homelessness. It's really important.
Thanks.
Thank you, Monica, for the question and Stacie for answering. And I don't know if Alfred let the hand raise or has another question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just forgot to take that down.
That's fine. I don't know if there is any other question for Stacie.
All right, just wanted to say that in addition to all these people that are in our meeting directly here, there's quite a few that are watching through YouTube or Lacais as well. So thank you very much for bringing us all this audience, Stacie. We really love the fact that you shared this great talk with.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, I want to ask us just a short question to Stacie. Stacie, as you propose, we will probably most of us want to be part of this responsible research. But what is the role of professors at the beginning of their careers? Because they have a role, because they have to model the students in order to get them into this path, so they don't discourage them in the process. So how we can do better in this stage?
Absolutely. So as I shared, the colleague that I'm working with, we started talking about this when she was a doctoral student, and now she's a junior faculty member working her way towards tenure. And I've told her, I'm a bit jealous because not just with this project, but some of the other work she's done, she's basically building her career doing responsible research. And that's something, like I said, I've looked to my other colleagues who've been able to do this. And I'm like, wow, I wish I could have always done that. I kind of look back and go, yeah, I mean, I don't regret the path I had. Obviously I've done okay as a scholar, and I'm pleased with my path and how I've proceeded, but it's just something I never could figure out for myself. And so I just have this joy when I see that there are scholars who are able, especially these early career scholars, who are able to kind of forge their entire career focusing on high impact, responsible research topics that are trying to make a difference, not just to, profit motive is important, the bottom line can be important, but also to society, like really thinking about how we can make the world a better place.
Yeah.
So I think we do have an important role as faculty. We can nurture and encourage students. We can encourage and nurture our junior faculty who are going through tenure and exploring these topics, and kind of giving them some room to run in this area, because it is a different path. It's not the traditional path. It can be a harder path, but it can be an extremely rewarding one.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you, Stacie. Indira has a question. I think it's the last one, because we are just in time we have a 5-minute break for the panel. Thank you, Indira.
Okay, so yeah, thanks again for Stacie, great talk, and thanks for giving a name to some of the things that we do. My question was if you had any recommendations, suggestions on how to legitimize the support for responsible research by universities and administrators and academic programs, maybe an ILO, PLO, learning outcome, or any comments you have about that.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we start to see a lot more recognition of this moving forward, particularly because AACSB has changed their guidelines of what they're wanting to see. They want to see scholarly impacts and curricular impacts. And I just found it amazing when I found this group, the RRBM network, the fact that they had AACSB as one of their members and other accrediting bodies, and they actually helped add this information or this part in the AACSB requirements. So I'm hoping that from a university or college and program perspective, we'll start to see more support for this coming up for faculty, because they're going to need to make a case for accreditation showing how they're making an impact through their work. And if more accrediting bodies will pick up this idea, I think that provides more institutional support. And then I would say at the AIS level, we're starting to see support. There's the AIS Impact Award that's now being offered every year that I would recommend and encourage you to take a look at. It's going to be the second year we're offering this award this coming year. We're seeing journal editors really supporting this idea of responsible research. Information Systems Journal has a special issue on the topic. Andrew Burton-Jones at MIS Quarterly has talked about our RBM network and responsible research and high impact research. I think we're starting to see it bubbling up within our field, and I hope we're starting to see that also happen within our institutions as well. I don't know that we're quite there yet, but I'm hoping it's coming.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stacie. I hope that we keep the question for the future, but now we are on time, and I wanted to thank Stacie for staying with us to share all that's important knowledge with our Lacais community in Latin America. And I want to give an applause to Stacie, and a big thanks, a big hug for her, because she raised a very important issue for us to start working in. Thank you, Stacie.
Thank you.